Shalom. I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to share with you how the nations of the world are coming against Israel. In one way in which the nations do this, especially in the Western world, is by media bias. So we're going to show you an example of media bias wherein the interviewer is persistent in trying to paint those who want to stand up for the land of Israel in the city of Jerusalem, that they are taking extremist views regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So now I'll share with you an interview based in England with the leader of the religious Zionist Jewish Home Party, Naftali Bennett. And it is as follows.
This week, Conflict Zone is in Jerusalem. My guest is Naftali Bennett. He's Education Minister. He's also leader of the right-wing Jewish Home Party. Naftali Bennett, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you. It's great being here.
You gave an interview last year. You were asked about the freeze in the peace process, a freeze that you supported. You said the process was suicide. We saved the country. Looking at the violence today, it doesn't look as though you saved the country at all, does it?
Well, Tim, for the past 100 years, we've had roughly 40 rounds of violence with radical Islam in 1921, 1929, 1936, 1939.
And that's the whole point. It's not getting better,
This is nothing new, and until the Muslim world accepts Israel's right to exist, and we were here way before Islam even started, it will go on. But you know what? Amid all this turbulence, Israel is growing. Israel is thriving, so I'm very optimistic.
U.S. Secretary of State says if you want to know what a one-state solution looks like, take a look at what's happening at the moment. Anyone who thinks otherwise can measure what unitary looks like by just looking at what's been occurring in Israel over the last few weeks. He says the two-state solution, there's no alternative.
Quite the contrary. What we're seeing is a result of the Oslo Accords that injected terrorists into Israel.
So Kerry knows nothing.
I'm talking about the point. The point is that when we went 100% all the way in 1999 in the Camp David Accords, Ehud Barak was willing to divide Jerusalem, willing to form a full-fledged Palestinian state. You know what happened? They murdered 1,000 Israelis as a result. Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa, we had buses blowing up everywhere. So
the murders go on all sides, don't they?
This approach, no.
The murders go on all sides.
I vehemently disagree.
You wrote about it in August in the New York Times. You talked about Jewish extremists murdering an 18-month-old baby.
And you know what the big difference is? When everyone has extremists. The difference is...
This is what I'm saying,
The difference, Tim, is that when there's an extremist on our side, the whole leadership of Israel goes out of its way to fight that. Whereas on the Palestinian side, when they murder Jews, you know what Mahmoud Abbas does? He pays the money.
Well,
he funds families.
You say this.
This is important. He gives prizes to murderers while we put them in jail. And that's the precise difference. I think many Jews...
That doesn't support what you say.
It totally supports it. We're in the midst of a wave of Muslim Arab terror. And I can understand, even if I don't accept, I can understand the fear of a Jew who's afraid that the person next to him will murder him. But first and foremost, we have to bring back security. Look, we're in an imperfect place. We're not in La La Land. We're in a reality, a very tough reality, where we want to create a beautiful Jewish democracy in Israel while we're surrounded by the craziest people in the world. It might be easier to live in London and sit and give comments than when you live here, but we live in a reality.
And do you think you're helped in doing that, in creating the kind of society you want, by bulldozing the houses of suspected terrorists?
Not suspected. We're talking about bulldozing the house of terrorists. Here's the deal. These terrorists are willing to die. Now, if someone's coming and willing to kill you, and you know he doesn't care, he's willing to commit suicide, then the only way to prevent it is if he knows that his house will be destroyed, and therefore you create the deterrence necessary to prevent the next terror attack. We don't want to do this. But when hundreds of Muslims, radical Islamic terrorists are out to kill me and my family, yes, I will defend myself. And you know what? I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm proud of it.
General Ehud Chumney, who wrote the report in 2005 on the basis of which the army stopped bulldozing houses, he said just the other day, he said that Palestinian resolve was actually strengthened by the demolitions. and that the motivation of individual Palestinians to fight against Israel was probably increased by these demonstrations. So it's a counterproductive policy.
That's what he says. I differ. I think that when a terrorist, now the equation for a terrorist is very positive. He knows this. I go, I kill a Jew or two, I die, that's fine, I get to have 70 virgins in the next world. My family will get a monthly salary, I'll be paraded as a hero. We have to change this equation. That's the problem. As long as the equation is so powerful, they're going to continue killing dozens of Jews.
At the same time as you want to do that, you want the Palestinians to recognize Israel as the Jewish state, when Israelis themselves can't agree on what the Jewish state is.
The Jewish state is very simple. It's my home.
What about the disagreements? So the nation-state bill. What about the nation-state bill?
Just open up the most popular book in the world. It's called the Bible. I'm not suggesting to form a Palestinian state in the midst of Israel. I think that would be a profound mistake. Vehemently oppose the notion of forming another failed Arab state in the heart of Israel. That's crazy. All the rest are falling apart and disintegrating into tribal structures. So here, we're going to try another artificial one. Why? Do I want to commit suicide? I'll also remind you, Tim, hold on. I'll remind you, we tried this. In 2005, we did the big experiment in Gaza. We did all three things the international community wanted. We pulled back to the 67 lines. We pulled out all our soldiers. And you know what? We expelled 8,000 Jews from their home by force. And what did we get days after?
Even David Cameron a few years ago called it the prison. Said it was
it was going to be the Singapore of the Middle East. It was open, but then
with you guarding it?
No,
with you guarding it, it was going to be the Singapore of the Middle East.
Besides the fact that you're stating wrong facts, everything's okay. The reality is quite the contrary. When we gave them Gaza, we said go build a Singapore. And you know what? They shot thousands of missiles from there onto Israel, which is why, yes, we need to defend ourselves. What do you do when every centimeter of land that you hand the radical Islamist turns into a base of Iran and radical Islam? What do you do? We did it in Lebanon, and now we have 150,000 missiles there. We did it in Judea and Samaria, and they killed 1,000 Israelis.
I understand. I'm talking about what you do. And what you're not prepared to do is to end the occupation, because you don't think it is an occupation.
That's correct.
You always say,
are you occupying London?
How can you occupy land? How can you occupy land when it's already your own?
Jews have been living in Jerusalem way before British people were living in London. On an international basis, international law, we're talking about disputed territory.
The former head of Shin Bet, Avraham Shalom, says we've become a brutal occupation force, directly challenging the things that you're telling us about what you're doing for Israel.
Well, if you and I go out on the street now, we can walk around, you'll meet Arabs who have good jobs, who vote for the Knesset, the same Knesset I'm a member in.
These are former heads of Shin Bet.
Yeah, I always believe reality is stronger than any words. You know very well that 1.5 million Israeli Arabs vote for the Knesset, they pay taxes in Israel, they get all equal rights in Israel, and I'm their very good education minister trying to do my best to make their kids get a better education. That's the reality. There's no place better on earth for Arabs than in Israel. That's the reality. It might be tough for you to accept that, but that is the reality.
Well, it's not up to me to accept or not. But one of the things that you said last year was that the world isn't interested in your conflict. You get foreign ministers, you get presidents, you get people visiting from all over the world. The conflict doesn't interest them. So if the conflict doesn't interest them, why are you so exercised over something like boycott, divestment, and sanctions? Why does the Anti-Defamation League point out that the number of BDS campaigns has doubled in America over the last academic year? Why are you allocating special funds, 100 million shekels, to fight boycott, divestment, and sanctions if you're not worried about it?
Actually, Israel's economy has never been better. We had $2.5 billion of VC investment in startup companies 2 years ago, 3.6 billion last year, 4.5 billion this year. The GPS...
And what about BDS?
Hold on. The GPS that you use to get to work is Israeli technology.
What about BDS?
The stent in your heart is Israeli technology. The water technology that grew this plant is Israeli technology. Intel chips are made in Israel.
And the EU is now examining proposals that reach into your banking, your loans and mortgages, your qualifications from settlement institutions, as well as the tax-exempt status of European charities that deal with your settlements. So they're going to be attacking your financial institutions.
Well, the reality is that we've never
And you're
been...
not worried about that?
We're always concerned about everything, and especially when there's countries who exercise...
That doesn't sound very serious, Minister. We're always
Tim,
concerned about
we are
everything.
concerned, but I come from the high-tech industry. I ran a high-tech company that today secures 70% of North American transactions and UK transactions. Citibank, Chase, Bank of America are all protected. Hundreds of millions of customers are protected by technology that my personal engineers and my company develop. I don't think the world's about to give up.
And what if European banks don't want to trade with you anymore? They don't want to do business with you anymore? Because that's the threat, isn't it?
European
that's
banks,
the prism through which they're looking at Israel
if
now.
someone wants to give up on the best technology in the world, only second, in terms of size, we're only second to Silicon Valley. Israel has the best high-tech industry per capita.
You keep saying
that's fine.
But what about the attitude? What about the attitude of the rest of the world? You're either worried about it, which your foreign ministry constantly says it is, or you say everything's fine. The rest of the world isn't concerned about our conflict. No, the rest of the world is very concerned about your conflict.
There is one unique place. I'll tell you, China, India, our commerce is growing exponentially. United States, Western Europe, the EU, there are pockets of anti-Semitism that whatever we do, they don't care that...
Why is it anti-Semitism? Why is there just criticism? Why couldn't you just accept its criticism?
You know why? I'll tell you why. Because when you apply a double standard in Israel, a standard that you don't apply on yourself, but you do apply in Israel, when you see that Assad is butchering 250,000 of his own people, and what you really care about is building another kindergarten or not in a settlement, I call that double standard. When you see the only democracy in the Middle East fight for its life and defend itself, and then you talk about excessive force, that's a double standard. I call that anti-Semitism. It's been around for about 2,000 years, and it stemmed from Europe. But I want to say most of Europe is not anti-Semitic, but there are pockets of it. And unfortunately, especially with the growing Islamic presence in Europe, it is growing. This is a problem. Radical Islam is anti-Semitic.
More than 130 countries have recognized, at the UN, have recognized Palestine as a state. And you want the Palestinians to give up forever on this idea of a Palestinian state. You're too late, aren't you?
No, I'm not.
Way too late for this.
Tim, let me tell you something. I have 4 children, a 10-year-old, 8-year-old, 6, and 3. We live just 10 minutes from the proposed Palestinian state. If we were to form a Palestinian state according to these 130 countries and place a radical Islamic state just 10 minutes from my house, I would put my children at a harm's way.
Doesn't have to be a radical Islamic
state. Not going to happen.
Does it?
Well,
doesn't
it does.
have to be.
In La La Land, it's not. In reality, it is. Because we're not living in a soap opera, Tim. We live in Israel. We live in the heart of the toughest place in the world. And yet, we still have a vibrant democracy. I'm proud of it. But
despite what your president says, despite the criticism,
despite all our imperfections, though I'm sure the rest of the world is perfect. I want to see what the Londoners and what Berliners would do if thousands of radical Islamic terrorists would be running around trying to kill them. Let's see. What did the Ferguson, Missouri do? Was that excessive force? What did Baltimore? Every police force in the world would do exactly what we're doing, probably much more in terms of defending its people. That's all we're doing. We're defending ourselves.
Naftali Bennett, thanks for being on Conflict Zone.
Thank you very much. This was great.
Well, that's going to conclude this week's report, where we shared with you an example of media bias in the Western world, wherein the interviewer persists to frame the issues and the questions so that the viewer comes away with the impression that those who stand for the land of Israel and the city of Jerusalem are taking extremist positions and are inherently anti-Arab, anti-Islam, and opponents of a Palestinian state. Until we do it again, Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.